Hey, Grande Live! This is Coffee with Will, brought to you by Ronde Hospital, Northwest Furniture and Mattress, Anything 2 Digital, EONI, Valley Realty, Country Financial, and Schwab Tire Center. And I'm here today with Tim White, who is a candidate for the District 2 Congressional District, which includes Central and Eastern Oregon. He's running on the Democratic ticket, and he's here today to talk to me a little bit about himself and who he is and what brought him to the position of running for office. So thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me, Will. I appreciate it.
So tell me a little bit, you told me a little bit about yourself before we were off camera, that you were, you grew up in Michigan, or you spent most of your career in Michigan. You worked for, remind me of the
Chrysler
company?
Corporation.
Chrysler Corporation. And then you retired to Bend. Now, then after you got to Bend, you somehow got to the place of deciding that you wanted to run for office. What brought you to this place of running for office on the Democratic ticket in a very historically conservative district, District 2?
Well, let me answer it this way.
Sure.
I'm a student of history. Over the years, I enjoy reading about political figures. Never had a lot of interest in politics, but political figures I do find interesting. So I've read a lot of the biographies, autobiographies of anybody from Washington to Adams, Jefferson, Madison, the Roosevelts, up through Eisenhower, Truman, Nixon. And the one thing that I think these people always shared in common, they had different philosophies about how we do things and stuff, but I always found the leaders of the country put the country first. These people had a shared philosophy of what can I do to make the United States better? What can I do to make the people of the United States better? And then last November, through an anachronistic electoral college, we elected a person that I think is the least qualified man to ever sit in the White House. And as I watched the agenda unfold over the last year with Mr. Trump, I said, I can't sit back and not do something. I believe Mr. Trump has two principles that have guided his entire life, a high degree of narcissism and a high degree of what is good for Donald Trump. And unlike all those other presidents that I read about over the years, I don't believe Mr. Trump has the interest in improving the country or improving the people's livelihoods of the country. Well, I've got kids and I've got grandkids, and there's 300 million people in the country, and they have a lot of kids and grandkids out there too. And I think my time would be better spent in retirement going back to work, as much as I never really wanted to do that, to try to change something. That I don't like the direction that we're going, and I think it's important that somebody get in there and start fighting back against the tide.
So how do you see your run for District 2 as fitting in with that? How does that fit in there?
I was, in undergrad, I was an economics major. And then I went on to graduate school. I got an MBA in finance. It's an interesting dichotomy because as an economist, we love to grab all the facts and figures you can. And then you get into grad school, and the first thing they teach you is you have to make decisions in the business world without having full knowledge of all the facts and figures. So the first thing I did is revert back to my old school when I started looking at what's going on in the 2nd District. 20 counties. It's pretty diverse, but the things that you look at from an economist point of view, what's the net per capita income? What's the age of the working population? What's the age of retirement people? What are the industries? You do an analysis of what's going on in the district, and what I saw was a district where in the last 10, 12 years, the working age people have declined by 3%. The number of retired people in our district has increased by almost 25%.
Wow.
And by the way, those figures are all out of the Oregon Department of Labor. It's a really good report that I got from a young lady that I went looking for the data. So I'm looking at this district, and what I see is a district that is, I think our district is on the precipice. If you look at the facts and figures of where we are, we've lost 50% of our job base. while Portland has picked it up.
Yeah.
This is a district that's primarily, it's agriculture, it's ranching, it's extraction, but those are industries that require younger people. And we've got a district that's aging pretty rapidly. I think if we don't look out there and say, what can we do differently in this district to reverse these things, I think we're going to have some real issues. And I'm from Bend, yes. Bend is not considered a rural district.
No, yeah, for sure.
Neither is Jackson.
But it is surrounded by a lot of very rural farming. I mean, when you drive into Bend, there's farms, there's ranches. I mean, going out of Sisters, there's the Black Butte Ranch. I mean, it's surrounded.
Most of Deschutes County is rural, but because Bend is so concentrated.
Yeah.
With let's say it's a little more successful than the rest. The county itself is not considered rural, but you're right. You go 6 miles east of Bend, and you are in just like the rest of the rural counties.
Yeah.
So what I'm looking at is a district that I think needs what I did for 3+ decades at Chrysler.
Sure.
What I was pretty good at was going into different divisions of the company that needed help. You know, in a corporate world, that's not considered good politics, by the way, because the last thing you want to do if you want to have a successful career is ever have yourself associated with something that failed. Well, yes, my problem is I've had this attitude from the time I went to work for the company that, you know, going into an operation that's running really well is boring.
Yeah.
There's no real challenge to it. You just have to keep the machine humming along. So I early on would take assignments that other people just necessarily didn't want to get close to because the risk of failure was high, and the risk of what that would do to your career. But it turned out I was actually pretty good at it. I actually wrote a book that was published in 1997. It's called the 60-Minute ABC Book for Activity-Based Costing.
And could you say that one more time?
Yeah, it's a mouthful. It's called the 60-Minute ABC Book for activity-based costing for management.
Okay.
And I was good enough to the point that I wrote a book on how do you go into an operation and turn it around. The whole concept of how to change things and turn things around fascinated me. And as I say, I proved that I was pretty good at it to the point that I wrote this book on it.
Sure.
And the book was pretty well received. I hadn't thought about it in quite some time. As I say, it was 1997, so it's been a while. But when I look at the 2nd District, it's a district that needs somebody to come in with some fresh ideas on what's going on in our district, what do we need to do. And so I'm talking about some pretty specific things that we need to do, my opinion.
Yeah, sure, no, absolutely.
And I'm sure not everybody's going to share in this, but
still your opinion.
It's still my opinion. In order to turn things around, we'll start with, we have to reverse the economic opportunity for people in this district. As I say, the net per capita income in this district is about $19,000. That's $2,500 less than the average of all other rural districts across North America. So we need to figure out, how do we correct this? Well, to correct it, you're going to have to bring some jobs back into the district that left. We're not going to bring back in the woodworking jobs. Sorry, you know, lumber was on one side of the state. They used the lumber for woodworking. On this side of the state, it doesn't work anymore. If you go out to some of the cities, you're going to find the woodworking shops are closed. It went overseas because, hey, Asian labor is $200 a month. You're not going to compete with that. But if you look at some of the areas, as I was driving here today across I-84, and I'm looking at the factories coming across here. When you go down to the southern part, where 97 runs into California, you see manufacturing. Why don't we see this in the rest of the district? The first reason we don't see this is because the infrastructure for roads is pretty horrible. I mean, the roads are in decent shape, but they're 2-lane highways for the most part out of 1955. Coming from the manufacturing world, I can tell you the first thing that any company will ask about, if you want me to relocate, tell me how I get my trucks in and out. And if I tell you you're going to take Highway 20 on a 2-lane road, that I wouldn't suggest driving on it after dusk because it's a tough road, they're going to say I'm not interested. So one of the first things I'm proposing, I think we need an interstate coming off of Ashland from I-5. I want to take it into Harney. and I want to go due north from Harney all the way up to 84. We need something to dissect this district. And then if we could bring a connector from Ontario all across from, again, I-84 through the Cascades to I-5, now we've got some decent infrastructure that we can then go after the companies and say, okay, you can get your trucks in, product out. Then we go after, I think, something that other people were talking about, but we're really not doing anything about, and that's solar energy. We just was in the paper several weeks ago. There's 5 new solar facilities. They're all on the west side of the Cascades. We're the high desert. We're 300 plus days of sun a year. Why aren't we building solar farms across our district? We talk about we want to take the dams out of the gorge because, hey, they were built in the early ones in 1937. There was a time we needed them. Technology has changed. The environment's changed. We want to protect that environment up there in the gorge. Well, we need the energy. I think each one of those dams are generating over 2,000 megawatts. We can replace that with solar. We have it. The district is larger than most states east of the Mississippi. Sure. We have enough land out there to do it.
Yes, we do have a lot of land out here.
So if you combine decent road infrastructure, available land, and energy, you can convince these companies to come locate here. You see what's happening down in the southern part of the state. Even then the wineries are coming up into Oregon because the land is so expensive and it's getting so difficult to operate down in Napa. You're seeing people coming up going, why don't we do this here? Well, we're not going to build vineyards out here in the middle of the desert.
No, I think that would be a bad business decision.
but we can bring these factories back. And the reason I say factories is because generally those are the highest paying type jobs. And I'm not talking about 2,500 people, automotive assemblies. I'm talking about companies that are 50 to 200 people. And the types of companies that I think we should be going after are like food processing. You look in Jefferson County, it's a huge agricultural area. We have no food processing. So we grow the stuff, we put it in the trucks, and they somehow get it out of the state. There is a large food processing facility over outside of Ontario. Heinz built it. Well, why don't we start talking to some of these other companies saying, you should consider strategic locations around the state. This is the possibility to do this. But it takes firm ideas on how to do it. So when I'm talking about roads, I'm talking about energy, I'm talking about available land, I'm talking about going after the companies. And these are not 10, 15 years off. If we could start doing these things right away, we could start creating the jobs. Somebody's got to build those roads. That's immediate employment. Somebody's got to build those solar farms. We don't have to wait 10 years for these things. I think you see enough people interested. We have one small solar farm that's actually under development now north of Bend. We need lots of these. This is the future for that district. I don't think we have enough wind out there to do the turbine thing as they're doing here in the gorge, but this is the option that I see for the district.
It's interesting because I just recently had Colleen McLeod-Skinner in here, and she was, her keyword was infrastructure. That was her big keyword as well. And however, she focused a lot on water and water rights and those kinds of things. Those were things that were sort of on the forefront of her mind. Now, so my question for you is this: with words like infrastructure, roads, solar panels. I mean, these are very sort of progressive ideas, which is all fine. But District 2 has historically been a very sort of conservative district. How, running on the Democratic ticket, if you are elected, because I think most conservatives like the idea of jobs and economic development. I mean, these are words that conservatives use that are really good, and I think everyone likes those. So, and they're very closely tied with what you're talking about here. How are the things that you're talking about going to kind of benefit, especially this area, this Eastern Oregon area, which is very rural, very conservative, very concerned with things like economic development and so on and so forth. How are all these things going to directly affect Eastern Oregon, especially here in the Grand Ronde Valley?
Well, I think you have a little bit of advantage up here to start with in that you have access to I-84.
Yes, that is true. It's one thing we have.
If you look at the employment levels across the district, okay, out of the 20 counties, I think there are 4 counties that have positive job growth since 2007. There are 16. I think Gilliam, I could be wrong, I've got my data in my briefcase, but Gilliam, I think, is the worst. They're 20% less than 2007. So without bringing the companies in here, as I've talked about, your employment situation is worse now than before the recession. And even the jobs that have come back into the district have, for the most part, been lower paying service jobs. We've had a lot of restaurant jobs that have come back, you know, the breweries and et cetera. Fine, nobody has a problem with breweries, but I think
You have to have your bread and butter.
you have to have your bread and butter. And here's the question I ask. With our current congressperson, this is his 10th term. This didn't start in 2007. Okay, 2007 and 2008 was a terrible crash. But these things have been going on for some time. Where have the innovative ideas for encouraging companies to come, whether it's Southern, Central, or Eastern, where have those innovative ideas been? They certainly haven't been coming from our congressperson that's been in office 19 years and counting now. So what we can do for Eastern Oregon, I think it's a little bit easier, but it simply takes somebody getting on the phone, talking to those companies, and saying, this is what we have to offer. Can I at least get you to come up to Grande or Baker City and look at it? I'll meet you there. I'll drive you around. I'll get the local commissioners to help me with this. Why hasn't this been done? This is not rocket science. It's simply a matter of, do you have the willpower, the whatever, to make this endeavor a priority? I don't believe, when I do my research, it's not just on the district, it is, well, what has Mr. Walden done for us? He's renamed a couple post offices. He got some land pushed back on the Crooked River Ranch, which a couple ladies told me 2 weeks ago, yeah, well, that's just so they could build more houses, but that was the argument they made. I don't see what Mr. Walden has done for the district. Now, there is an attitude of some people, and because they've said this to me, and I've been speaking to mostly Democrats, because we're trying to get through a Democratic primary in May. And they will say, well, a lot of us just don't want it to change. I appreciate that. But you can't have it both ways. I always quote, I get in this discussion one night out in Burns where a lady said, I don't want my kids to have to move. And I said, ma'am, if they don't have a job, they're going to move. This is the way the world works. I can remember, when I was 23 years old, I had to move to get a job in Detroit. That's where my job was. My family was back in Indiana, but hey, you want to start something, you want to have a career, this is what's going to happen. So we have two options. We can either say, we have to recognize the district has to grow. We have to develop. And we're not going to turn Eastern Oregon into urban Chicago. This is not going to happen.
Well, darn it. That's kind of what I was hoping for here.
And I like Chicago.
I want my Reubens, and I want them delivered to my front door.
Yeah, well, you're going to have to do without a few of these things.
Dang it.
But at the same time, we have to recognize that growth is not always a bad thing. I totally agree it needs to be managed. A lot of us moved to this area of the country because of its beauty, because of its natural environment. We certainly don't want to lose that.
Sure.
But driving over here just today on 84, and I've done this drive a few times, by the way, when you're going, the only thing I ever regret is I don't have a sports car to drive that highway. But, they didn't destroy anything. And then when you're driving on 84 along the gorge, it's a good road. You're just, it's 150 miles once you make the turn from 97. And you're just driving this beautiful drive on a good highway with that gorge out there to the left and that beautiful river. It can be done. I'd like to get rid of those dams. I don't want to drive by those dams anymore. But, so as I say, your question was, well, what about specifically to Grande? I think the same approach would be used up here to go after the companies, to say, what kind of companies can we bring here? And of course, they're going to say, well, what's your available land? Tell me about your workforce. Tell me about your education system. That's another thing we have to work on in Oregon. We've got a problem with our education system, and I always am quick to point out, and I'm not blaming any teacher for this. I think our teachers have done an incredible job, but we need funding for education. And one of the things I've been talking about as I've been doing the campaign is the ability to get skilled trades and technical training back into the schools. There actually was an act, I think it was 1984, called the Carl Pickard or Packard.
I don't know.
I can't remember.
A little bit before my time.
Okay, all right. Unfortunately, I was working. But what it did was they funded about $1 billion every year to go across the high schools in the country. Well, there's 26,000 high schools. That gets you about $40,000. By the way, this was a Republican that got this through. That act was up for renewal this year. It passed the House. Again, a Republican congressman from Pennsylvania sponsored it. And the Senate turned it down. Just don't have the budget for it. Well, you don't, there's certain things you say you can't say you don't have the budget for it. You have to have the budget for it. It's the future of the country. Only 70% of the kids need this. You know, there are about 30% that go on to higher education. But most of our young people come out from high school. They need to have a sellable skill. If you don't have a sellable skill, then what are you going to do for a living? And if when I was in, it's been a while, as I always point out, Jimmy was our president, so it's been a while. But we had the shop classes, we had auto mechanics, we had electrical. We didn't have technical because Bill Gates hadn't changed the world yet.
Sure.
But now we do have all these things. And I think we need to really get bold about putting technical training back into the schools. It's the future. All you're doing is investing in your own self. Back in Detroit, it was like you had to know the story of Henry Ford. Henry Ford, when he came up with the $5 day, everybody thought he was crazy. And he said, no, I'm not crazy. I'm simply giving people enough money they can buy my products and make me a wealthy man. Well, we all know the end of the story. The Ford family did become fabulously wealthy. You have to invest in people if you want your economy to be successful. So I can't say specifically what are the school stats for Union County, but I can tell you overall in the county, or the whole, or the district, the state ranks fourth from the last in graduation rates. Okay, this has to change, because if I'm going to go out there and convince companies to come here, they're going to say, well, you can give me land, you can give me the roads, you can give me energy, but I need an educated workforce. Even in manufacturing. Manufacturing is no longer the world of slapping two parts together with a wrench. Manufacturing, it's a high-tech world. One of the last things I did with my joint venture with Chrysler, Mitsubishi, and Hyundai, we had like 600 CNC machines in there. Wow. These are machines this is for cutting tools. We made camshafts and blocks and heads. We had mills it to incredible precision. Well, these are machines that are anywhere from $500,000 to several $1 million a piece.
Sure.
Before you turn somebody loose on a machine like that, they have to know how to read well. They have to have some critical skills, being able to think about why something happened the way it did. Because we don't just turn them loose on a machine and tell them to run it. The expectation in manufacturing is you will understand your product and your process, because we want you to improve it. We don't want you to just stand there and crank widgets all day long. We want you to tell us. And in our workforce, we were very demanding in terms of, I'm just not hiring you to help us build an engine. I want you to help us build the lowest cost, the best quality engine on time, every day of the week. And so to do that, you need a good educated workforce. And I think we really need to focus on that here in the state.
So what I'm hearing here is, a lot of this stuff is, based on, and then, good ideas or no. They're your ideas, and they may or may not be good ideas. But I think one of the questions that if I were someone that was in Eastern Oregon here, that was kind of like, what was maybe listening to this would be, these are all great ideas, but, and this is probably the last question because we're kind of running out of time here. Okay. So how do you implement them with the limited resources that we have in Eastern Oregon with our limited, because people aren't making, like you said, the per capita amount of money that people are making around here is not high. We don't have the six-figure technical incomes and those kinds of things. And taxes, whether or not you like them or not, come directly from salaries. So how do we make investments in things like infrastructure, things like education, things like solar, when people are struggling just to put healthy, satisfying, nourishing food on their tables and be able to get to work every day with their car, with their 15 or 20 minute commute in the nearest city. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah,
that would be
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, education is primarily funded by the state. Okay, I think the federal government provides 7 or 8%. There's no rule that says the federal government only has to provide 7 or 8%.
Sure.
Okay, to start with, if we could convince enough people that skilled trades training and technical training was important enough, I don't want it left to the states, because you're going to get some state like California that's well funded in their school system going, well, okay. And then you have an area like Grande saying, well, wait a second, Tim, we don't have enough money. You're absolutely right. I think it is so important that I would like to see an expansion of what they've already done at the federal level. So that's to start with. I would like to see, like say, the current bill that was passed by the House was $1.1 billion in 2018, and I think to $1.3 billion by 2023. But that was split over 26,000 high schools.
Sure.
So at 40,000 a school, you're not going to do enough. I'd like to see that number go to 3 or 4 billion. If I could give every high school $150,000, now you've got some money to actually hire a couple teachers, or a combination of teachers and equipment that you're going to need to put this back in place. You cannot ask a district where people are struggling on $20,000 a year to ante up more. It needs to come from the federal government. Does the federal government have the money? Let me give you my best example of yes. Last year we took delivery of the Gerald R. Ford. That is our 11th aircraft carrier in our defense budget. Okay? That was 10 years in the making for $13 billion. And upon delivery of the Gerald R. Ford, you know what the Navy proposed? We need 3 more. The price tag, if we started to building them right now, is about $40 billion per. All right, so they're saying we need another $120 billion. That would take us to 14 aircraft carriers. Here's where it gets fun. I can understand that, because China has one, which they got from Russia as a half-built Hawk about 10 years ago. Russia has one that they say is so unreliable that it generally doesn't go too far without the tugs for when it breaks down. So we have 11. And our Navy says we need 3 more for another $120 billion. This is right. ISIS is not running around the Atlantic Ocean, okay? We need to rein in the defense spending. 15, 20 years ago, our defense budget was about $200 billion, okay? It hit $700 billion a year and a half ago. Nobody spends this amount of money. We spend more money, you know, as a country than the next 10, 12 countries combined. That includes Russia and China, because the rest of the world has finally said, well, this is silly. You know, I've been to China many times. And by the way, when you go to China and you see the infrastructure they're building over there, it takes your breath away. So does the smog, by the way.
Yeah.
But the rest of the world is building infrastructure and realizing that investment in their people and their infrastructure of the country is what is going to take them into the future, not investing in another aircraft carrier that we don't need. So when people say the government is struggling to pay the bills, I think the federal government has an obligation. And I'm not an ultra liberal Democrat. Okay,
Sure.
I was a chief finance officer. By our nature, we tend to be a little conservative.
Yeah.
But we also know that there is a time when money needs to be spent. I mean, my job over my career was people coming in my office and saying, Tim, I want to spend money to do this. And Tim sitting there going, okay, how much? How long? What does it get me quality-wise, delivery-wise? I need to know these answers. And every once in a while you'd go, yeah, I think that's a good idea. I used to really freak out the manufacturing guys when I'd grab my hard hat and say, let's go take a walk. I want you to show me exactly what you want to do on the floor. Finance guys aren't expected to do that.
Yeah.
But we have enough money. We just need to prioritize the spending of that money to where it's going to build a future of the country. So you're absolutely right. When when I talk about our average district of $19,000 per capita income, okay, you can't go to people And by the way, you go out to Mount Her or Lake, it's about 14,500.
Yeah.
You cannot possibly go out there and ask these people, we need to fund the high school program, would you mind another $500?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Okay, what I want to do is tell the federal government, our district is a microcosm of a lot of the rural districts across the United States. We're not the only district suffering. But when you read the stories about towns all across the Midwest that have dried up and blown away, I don't want to see that.
Drove through one of those this week and come back from then, Kent, Oregon.
I drove through a couple coming up 97.
Yeah,
There's not much there. This doesn't have to be. But the federal government has an obligation, and I'm not saying to hand things out. I'm not a handout guy. I use the thing what my old man used to, my father, excuse me. my dad taught me when I was younger. He said, Timmy, you see all these advertisements today, the tagline is always, you deserve it. Well, my father had a different point of view. Yeah. My father was of the point of view, no, you don't deserve it, but you certainly have the right to earn it. Go earn it. Our population has a right to earn it. And I think it's to the betterment of the future of our country and our population if we give them the ability to earn it. And right now, we're not doing that. And I had to spend 5 hours in the car listening nothing but the tax debate today. It's foul that we're going to, basically, I think about 98%, 99% of the people in the state of Oregon will have a tax increase as a courtesy of this, so that we can give people that are earning a lot of money a nice big tax break. This is wrong. We need to put some common sense back into this. It is my hope that there are enough Republican senators that will stand up and say, no, this is wrong. If this tax bill was so good, the $1.5 trillion, which by the way, I said 2 days ago to my wife, that's a lie. And then Mulvaney, who's the budget director, he's in the paper today because he's the other guy they're trying to throw into the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau right now.
Oh, okay.
He came out and said, yeah, the real number is probably about 2.2 trillion, but we're trying to figure out how to get it down. So they're actually kicking in kickers. So once they have to admit that they never stayed within the 1.5, that the tax things will go away for the individuals, but not the corporate. We need some common sense. I mean, that's all it was running a business. When somebody would walk in and say, can I do this, Tim? Can I have the money to do this? Well, come show me why you want to do it. And sometimes you say it's a good idea. And sometimes you have to say, yeah, it's a good idea, we can't do it now. Why don't you come back and see me in 6 months and we'll see if things are a little bit better. We need to look at our district the same way. We need to look, what can we do immediately? What can we do in the more, not so near term and the longer term? I talk about setting goals as an important thing. You don't get from A to D without setting goals about how to get to B, how to get to C. For me, my own purpose, I have some goals. I need to get past the primary in May.
That is a good first step.
After that, I need to somehow get past a 10-term congressman who I believe in my heart has done everything for pharmaceuticals, telecoms, utilities. He's done nothing for his district. And then I need to go figure out how to get a whole bunch of people in Washington to actually agree with me. And my end game, and I'll end it with this. If 10 years from now, somebody said, I don't know what the hell those people did in the 2nd District, but we ought to go find out how they did it, I will have accomplished something that I think will be more valuable than anything I did in 33 years at Chrysler Corporation.
Well, there you go. You heard it right there, Grande Alive. That if he can do it in 10 years and people are looking at us, then an entire career at Chrysler has been put to shame.
I'm sorry if anybody's from Chrysler possibly sees this. I was just kidding. I loved it.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for coming in and giving me some of your opinions and your thoughts. And Grande Alive, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts and opinions on some of the things that have been expressed here today. Please comment on the video. This video has been brought to you by Grande Hospital, Northwest Furniture and Mattress, Anything 2 Digital, EONI, Valley Realty, Country Financial, and Schwab Tires. Please like and share the video and tune into LeGrandeLive.tv for more local content. I'm Will Bowman.